Today is Monday, January 19th, 2026. This is Quick Start from CBN News. I'm Dan Andros. Protesters storm a church in a disturbing scene in Minnesota. We'll have that top story and more on today's podcast, where we bring you news from a Christian perspective. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating. You can email us as well. Quick Start Podcast at cbn.org. That's our email address. Glad you're here with us, getting through the news of the day bright and early. With me today, CBN's Billy Hallowell. A lot to get to, Billy, on the focus story. We're seeing it again, Jesus appearing to Iranians in their dreams. Incredible update here.
Yeah, it is. You know, the story that we keep hearing that people convert as a result of encountering Jesus in those supernatural ways. We'll be talking about that on today's show.
All right, looking forward to the details there coming up in just a minute. Also, on the main thing, a Christian YouTuber in Egypt is sentenced to 5 years of hard labor. His crime? Defending faith online. Well, the details coming up on the main thing. All right, I want to tell you about our sponsor of this podcast, Christian Solidarity International. I mean, if you've listened to us for a while, you know we're talking about persecution a lot because it's still happening and rampant throughout the globe. And today is going to be no exception. There's more coming up on the podcast on that because it's so prevalent and it's very, very disturbing. And that's why we've partnered with Christian Solidarity International. They're not just reporting on persecution, which is important, but they're responding to it in real time. They're working in some of the most dangerous and forgotten parts of the world. They are helping persecuted Christians survive and rebuild for tomorrow. And they are out there helping families who've been displaced. They're providing trauma care and spiritual support for believers who've endured violence and loss and persecution. They stand and come alongside local churches. And of course, it's very personal for them. They know these people. They know the names. They know the villages. These aren't just numbers. They're not just flying in and flying out. I mean, these are ongoing, long-term relationships that they are building throughout the globe. And so we want you to pray and also stay informed. But if you're able, partner with CSI as they help restore and assist and stand alongside our brothers and sisters in Christ in some of the most heavily persecuted areas in the world. Learn more and get involved at csi-usa.org. Again, that's csi-usa.org. We're going to go to the news in 90 seconds now, and anti-ICE protests in Minnesota have escalated again. This time, a church became a target. And over the weekend, a group of these protesters just stormed into a worship service at City Church St. Paul and chanting "Justice for Renee Good" and interrupting prayers as the pastor was preaching. Protesters claimed without any evidence that one of the church's pastors was connected to immigration and customs enforcement, raising alarms that activists are now moving from street demonstrations into houses of worship. Video from inside the sanctuary shows demonstrators standing in the aisles and openly describing the disruption as a mission, intensifying concerns from faith leaders and law enforcement. The incident comes as all these anti-ICE demonstrations across Minneapolis, St. Paul continue to grow more aggressive following the fatal shooting of Renee Good. Billy, it was just a disturbing scene over the weekend, and Don Lemon was there, and he just barges into this church service and is interviewing, and they're saying the thing that he said that really disturbed me is that people have just have it so backwards there in Minnesota, these protesters, saying it was a First Amendment right of these people. He's like, are you listening to them? It's like they go into, I mean, a church is obviously a welcoming place, but it's also private property. You can't just barge into somewhere, somebody's doing something and intimidate them and threaten them and yell and do all this stuff and expect you to be welcomed. I mean, it's just ridiculous what people are trying to get away with these days in Minnesota in these protests. And what people are concerned about now is that this isn't just mostly peaceful protests and everyone's out on the side of the street with a sign. They are running around. I mean, I've seen multiple clips, Billy. One guy was renting a car. I think he was in the media, so he had cameras and such. But he was renting an SUV and he gets interrogated about being ICE, and they're surrounding him and threatening him. Another person was walking down the street with a USA hoodie with a flag on it, and they're yelling at him to take off the flag and like chasing him. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's crazy what's going on right here, and you can't help but think this is an intentional escalation.
Well, yeah, and I think there's some confusion about what the First Amendment issue is. Like a church is exercising its First Amendment rights
Right.
by worshiping. And
Yes.
so, yeah, you have a right to protest. I don't think you have a right, though, to walk into private property. I mean, a church is private property, and to disrupt and disturb and stop people from exercising their First Amendment rights. These people are unhinged. It's fine to protest. It's fine to do that peacefully. But when you're doing this sort of thing, you've crossed the line. And, I just think that people are so ginned up and angry, and they're not thinking clearly about anything. It's wild to me that people would go out to stop a perceived injustice by being unjust, right? It's like, let's just fight this. And like, it's wild. And I think this actually is one of those things. It's more about people than it is about the cause.
Mm-hmm.
People are selfish and they make it more about themselves. And I think when you're storming into a church, you've crossed that line.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're certainly going to keep you up to date on this and what happens. And as things progress there in Minnesota, because it's certainly getting troubling. And when people feel they have a right to do this kind of stuff, it's only going to lead to bad things and escalations. All right, we're going to go to the focus story now. And Lily Meschi, the director of Iran Alive Ministries, believes something is different about recent Iranian protests as compared to ones we've seen in recent history. So what's the story here?
Yeah, obviously it seems like some things, are tempering in Iran because of the way the government's handled things, but that the level of protest, she said, look, we shouldn't be surprised by these protests. They're not surprising. They're very sad. The numbers are horrific. We've covered them on the show. They're estimates of how many people have been killed in the streets by the Iranian government. And she said it's very sad, but she believes, and by the way, she was born and raised in Iran and left, but she believes that this could be signaling that the end of the Iranian regime is coming, even though it's not here yet, that they're taking their last breaths right now. And so she's been encouraging Christians. And, for those who don't know, her organization, Iran Alive, they broadcast satellite messages, Christian messages into Iran, and the government can't stop it. And so they're evangelizing creatively. But she's encouraging every believer to stand firm and to speak into the darkness and to pray, because she believes this is a moment where that regime, again, could really be coming to a close.
And what's happening? You mentioned the dreams. We've reported on this sort of phenomenon before. So what's happening supernaturally there now?
We talked about a couple of different dynamics. The first dynamic, and we have to remember this, Ephesians 6, we're dealing with real evil. What the Iranian regime is doing is evil. It extends beyond material. It extends into just demonic evil, the sorts of behavior. And so you have these spiritual battles going on. And the other side of that is that you have all these people who have been restricted and held down by their government, and they've been deprived of the truth. They don't hear what Christianity is. They don't know a lot about it. And yet Jesus is appearing, according to so many of these people in Iran, in their dreams and in visions. And because of these dreams and visions, many Iranians will actually convert to Christianity. In fact, Lily said that one of her colleagues that she works with to spread the gospel in Iran came to faith through dreams and visions. And she said many, many people contact them because they see Jesus and they know that Iran Alive is a Christian channel. And so they're like, who is this Jesus? Tell us. She said they'll reach out and they'll go, we have seen Jesus in our dream and he healed us. And I don't know where to start. I want to believe in him. I want to trust him. And so I said, wait a minute, you're telling me these people not only saw Jesus in a dream or a vision, but they believe he healed them of some physical issue. And she said, yes, that they will have people come to them who have had physical healing from this mystery Jesus who they know nothing about. And they will come to Iran Alive and, ask them, hey, can you help us understand who this Jesus is? And so that's just, amazing. She said they have had real physical healings and Jesus appeared to them in their dreams and their visions and making himself known to them. So they know that it was Jesus. When they contact us, they already know that Jesus healed them and they just want to know more about him.
What does Meschi want Christians to do when it comes to Iran?
At the end of the day, she wants Christians to pray. She said, these people are dealing with authorities and evil rulers, and it's a brutal regime. She said, again, she believes that the regime is taking their last breaths. They're at the end of themselves, but that people really need to double down in prayer that there can be a real change there that is positive and beneficial for the people and that frees them from the chaos.
Yeah, it's incredible to see this phenomena happen. We've talked about it before, and you just don't know what way Jesus is going to work and God is going to draw people into himself. So you don't know how he's going to do it and what the mechanism is going to be, but it's so many times, Billy, that this has happened and that this has been their testimony, that you have to take note of what is going on there. And this is clearly a different time in Iran. There have been protests before, but as Lily said, it's different this time for a number of reasons. And to see how God is moving in the midst of that is very encouraging. And we need to be praying for people in Iran to come and know the Lord. It's just an exciting time in a dangerous time as well, all at the same time.
We just got to be in deep prayer, and we've got to be remembering these aren't just numbers. These are people, and they're Christians. And some of them, we need to be praying that Jesus shows up to more people there and that they can reach Iran Alive and other ministries who can help them make sense of what they're encountering.
All right. Well, great update there. Appreciate you bringing that one to the podcast today. If you want to see that full interview, you can check it out on the CBN News YouTube channel. Appreciate that. And we're going to go to the main thing now. And a Christian man in Egypt is facing 5 years of hard labor after posting videos defending Christianity on YouTube. Incredible. What does this say about religious freedom in that region, and why is his case raising alarms beyond Egypt? CBN's Nair is joined by Mariam Wahba, a research analyst at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, with the latest details.
Mariam, what is going on here?
Well, it's good to be with you. Look, the story starts in October when this young Coptic Christian researcher was arrested for under Egypt's blasphemy laws. And when you think of blasphemy laws, you're probably thinking this is an ancient thing that no longer exists, but in fact it does. Most Muslim majority countries have some sort of blasphemy laws that are intended by the state to create what they call social cohesion or religious cohesion. In practice, these blasphemy laws are used to target Christian and other ethnic and religious minorities, as we're seeing play out here in Egypt.
Okay, Mariam, you were born in Egypt, so this is obviously personal to you. And when we hear the term 5 years of hard labor, will they actually make him do that?
Look, this is a state that does enforce its judgments, and what we're learning about this case is that this young man who runs a YouTube channel with over 100,000 followers, in which he posts videos in which he explains Christianity and defends Christianity, and he was sentenced for misuse of social media and religious contempt as outlined by Egypt's blasphemy laws. So unless something changes in the coming weeks and months, this man will serve his 5-year sentence. And in attempt at shedding light on this case, what we at FDD are trying to do is enforce what the U.S. mandates of Egypt as part of our relationship. Washington and Cairo have a long and strengthened relationship as enforced by what's called the foreign military funding. And essentially, the United States gives Egypt $1.3 billion on average a year for security assistance. And in doing so, Egypt signs on to meet certain conditions as outlined by U.S. law. And this includes things like progress on human rights and progress on religious persecution. And Egypt has made commitments, verbal and through signing on to this FMF package, that it will continue to make improvements. And this law, or excuse me, this judgment is a flashpoint in this relationship, because it demonstrates that Egypt is not willing to follow through on the commitments it has made to Washington.
Now, famously, Egypt is home of the Coptic Christians. And I think for maybe a lot of folks in the United States, we hear Protestant, we hear Catholic, we even hear something like Eastern Orthodox, and we're like, okay, I can understand that. But I think for, I might be oversimplifying, but for an American audience, the idea of the Coptic Church is kind of an over there thing, not really sure what's going on. So I know this is a broad question, but what is the state of the Coptic Church in Egypt?
Absolutely. So the Coptic people are the indigenous people of Egypt, and they are descendants of the pharaohs. And Saint Mark the Evangelist traveled to Egypt to evangelize around 60 to 70 A.D. And because the ancient Egyptians had similar ideas to Christianity of a forgiving God and an afterlife, they quickly began to convert to Christianity. And in the next few centuries, we see that Egypt was a majority Christian country. Some researchers put it up as high as 85%. And then you had the Arab invasion of North Africa and Arabia. And that's when you see mass conversions and deaths and persecutions start to happen in Egypt. And you had a population shift. Today, Egypt is about 10 to 15% Coptic Christian. And it hasn't been easy for the Copts in the last few centuries. Obviously, certain leaders, certain presidents have brought certain levels of persecution, some higher than others. What we've seen in the years after the Arab Spring in 2011 and then 2013 is the Egyptian state trying to reconcile how it ought to treat its Christian minority group. And President Sisi has to be applauded for his fight against Islamism, particularly the Muslim Brotherhood, which he overthrew in a military coup, and ISIS, and so on and so forth. But I think what's notable about the state of Copts today is that the persecution is all encompassing. It's not exactly ISIS type church blowing up, but it is happening elsewhere in civil life and social life. I'm talking about things like Copts can't get into certain schools, Copts can't get certain jobs because they are deemed as second class citizens or really enemies of the state. When there are mob attacks, certain villages will burn churches or attack Christians. And of course, in the eyes of the law, Coptic Christians are almost not full citizens. In the courts, a Copt's testimony is worth a little bit less than that of a Muslim's testimony. We see reconciliation sessions after attacks on Coptic Christians where there's a perpetrator and there's a victim, and there's the victim Coptic Christian, and they're kind of forced into these reconciliation sessions that let the perpetrator go off the hook. And essentially, there's a culture of impunity in the Egyptian state towards the persecution of Copts, meaning that bad things happen to Copts and nobody gets punished for it.
Wow. Well, let's say you had a direct phone line to whoever's in charge of I think you said $1.3 billion. What would you want the United States government to do in this exact moment?
Look, now you're asking the $1 million question. There isn't much that we actually have to do proactively on this issue. The fact of the matter is the United States government has these laws, codified laws within our foreign military funding that says Egypt must, in engaging with Washington, make progress on these issues. And I think if I had the direct phone line to the Pentagon, the person that enforces the conditions of our foreign military funding, I would tell them enforce the law, meaning Egypt is not following through on the promises and commitments it has made to Washington. Therefore, we got to withhold some of that money and stop issuing waivers for large portions of that funding. And we can tell Cairo that they will get that security assistance as soon as they make movements and improvements on religious persecution issues.
All right, appreciate that update there. And that's going to leave us with time on the podcast today for one last thing.
We got 1 Thessalonians 5:16-18. Rejoice always, pray without ceasing, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you. We got to be praying always, no matter what the time of day is, no matter what is happening. Pray without ceasing.
Amen. Make it a habit. And it's something we all need to be doing, and doing regularly, not just when you're in an extreme situation and suddenly you feel like you need help. We need to be praying all the time. All right, that's where we're going to leave it on this edition of the Quick Start Podcast. As always, get on over to cbnnews.com, faithwire.com for more news from a Christian perspective. God bless. See you back here tomorrow.